We're going to start in America, where President Trump has had a tricky 24 hours. First, the Supreme Court has ruled against his attempt to get rid of a program that protects hundreds of thousands of immigrants who entered the US illegally as children from deportation. It's called DACA. It stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It was created in 2012 by President Obama. In 2017, the Trump administration tried to rescind it. Well, now the court has ruled 5-4 to uphold lower court rulings that found that move unlawful. Chief Justice John Roberts described the administration's actions as arbitrary and capricious. This is the second Supreme Court ruling against the Trump administration in just a week. President Trump tweeted, "Do you get the impression the Supreme Court don't like me?" It's worth pointing out that he appointed two of those justices, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, and that ideologically it currently leans towards the Republicans. Well, these were the scenes outside of the Supreme Court when that ruling was announced earlier today. Let's hear from one of the Dreamers. That's the name given to those undocumented youths brought to the US as children.
I've had DACA since I was 15, 16 years old. It's allowed me to go to college. It's allowed me to get a full-time job. That could have all been stripped away had the court decided differently today.
Anthony Zurcher joins us live from Washington. We've got lots to talk about, Anthony, but let's start with the Dreamers. A bad day for Donald Trump, I suppose. That's a bit of an understatement, isn't it? Well, how significant is this?
Yeah, considering that Donald Trump back in 2016 ran on the fact that he would be able to remake the federal judiciary system in a conservative image, put conservative judges on these courts, to see two very high-profile cases at the Supreme Court go against him has to be discouraging. Both obviously were close decisions. Both involved some conservative judges breaking over and siding with the more liberal judges. In this particular case, this DACA case, it was decided essentially on a technicality. The Chief Justice, John Roberts, said that while the president does have the power to rescind this DACA program, the way he did it, without crossing all the T's and dotting the I's, without having proper justification, that violated a 1940-era law that said you have to explain your administrative actions and provide grounding for them before you can go and make them.
Anthony, stay with us because I want to talk about another thing that's on the president's mind. The Trump administration is making a last-gap attempt to stop the publication of this book. It's the memoirs of the former National Security Advisor, John Bolton. A judge will decide in the next 24 hours whether the publication can go ahead next week as planned. But plenty of extracts have already been published in the press, and they are not flattering for the president, to say the least. John Bolton says Donald Trump approached China's president for help in getting re-elected. Mr. Bolton writes, he stressed the importance of farmers and increased Chinese purchases of soybeans and wheat in the electoral outcome. This is John Bolton being interviewed on American TV.
You say that you were astonished by what you saw. A president for whom getting reelected was the only thing that mattered, even if it meant endangering or weakening the nation?
Well, I think he was so focused on the reelection that longer-term considerations fell by the wayside.
Well, Mr. Bolton has also accused Mr. Trump of telling Xi Jinping that building internment camps for Uyghur Muslims was exactly the right thing to do. It's worth noting that the US State Department says China subjects people in those camps to torture, physical abuse and prolonged detention without trial because of their religion and ethnicity. Here's some more of that interview.
You described the president as erratic, foolish, behaved irrationally, bizarrely. You can't leave him alone for a minute. He saw conspiracies behind rocks and was stunningly uninformed. He couldn't tell the difference between his personal interests and the country's interests.
I don't think he's fit for office. I don't think he has the competence to carry out the job. There really isn't any guiding principle that I was able to discern other than what's good for Donald Trump's reelection.
Well, as is customary for the president, Donald Trump fired back on Twitter. He called John Bolton a wacko and says the book is full of lies and fake stories. He goes on, a disgruntled, boring fool who only wanted to go to war, never had a clue, was ostracised and happily dumped. What a dope! Exclamation mark. Well, the president also did the rounds on American media, talking up his own record. This was him on Fox News.
Nobody has been tough on China, and nobody has been tough on Russia like I have. And that's in the record books, and it's not even close. The last administration did nothing on either. And then in terms of Bolton, he broke the law. He was a washed-up guy. I gave him a chance. He couldn't get Senate confirmed, so I gave him a non-Senate confirmed position where I could just put him there, see how he worked.
Yeah, he's not happy, is he? Well, just to be clear, Donald Trump is claiming John Bolton broke the law by publishing classified information, but no court has agreed with that assessment so far. This isn't the first time that Donald Trump has turned on a former staffer. He's also had more opportunities than most to do so. This is a graph from the American think tank Brookings. The red bars show the total turnover executive staff during a president's term. That's President Trump's bar on the far right. There's been a turnover of staff in 88% of positions. That's the highest over the past 40 years. When former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said the president was undisciplined and didn't read briefing reports, the president responded by calling him as dumb as a rock and lazy as hell. President Trump called his former Defense Secretary Jim Mattis the world's most overrated general and said former Chief of Staff John Kelly was in way over his head and couldn't keep his mouth shut. The former White House Press Secretary Anthony Scaramucci has become a fierce critic of Donald Trump, and the president is now a fierce critic of him. Nobody ever heard of this dope until he met me. He only lasted 11 days. Anthony Scaramucci has been talking about what it's like to fall out with the president. This is what he had to say.
It's Trump employment syndrome. You try to like President Trump, you end up working for him, you experience the blowback, the insecurity, the shrapnel, the litany of lies, and then you start various coping mechanisms.
You know, there were gasps, Anthony, when I was reading that out. 88% of a turnover of staff under the Trump administration. I mean, he's trying his best to block this publication for John Bolton's book, but already the juicy bits are out there, aren't they?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you know, that ship has sailed. They may be able to block the publication. It's a kind of a last-ditch effort. But with all of these reports already getting out in the media, the most damaging details of John Bolton's book are going to be in the public. So there's not a whole lot they can do to stop that. In fact, maybe it is even drawing more attention to John Bolton's book. I wouldn't be surprised if it tops the bestsellers charts partially because of what the Trump administration is trying to do in reaction to it.
Anthony, I want to get your reaction to another development, and this has to do with Facebook, that made this announcement that it has taken down posts from the Trump re-election campaign because they violated the social network's policy against organised hate. One is reported to have complained of dangerous mobs of far-left groups destroying our cities and rioting, and including a red triangle upside down, the symbol for political prisoners in Nazi concentration camps. Anthony, what is your reaction to that? And have we heard anything from Donald Trump on this?
We haven't heard anything specifically from Donald Trump. We've heard from his campaign, however. They said that the upside-down red triangle is a symbol that Antifa itself uses, and that there's a red upside-down triangle emoji on the Facebook page. So if this were a controversial image, they certainly didn't know about it. But I think what the significance of this is it's showing that Facebook may be starting to move towards regulating the Trump campaign's postings a little more. If you remember, when Twitter took down several of Donald Trump's tweets just a few weeks ago, Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg came out and said, well, you know, we don't really get into policing the speech of politicians. So this is perhaps a sign that Facebook may be reversing course a bit.